everyone. I'm Sean McCusker, and welcome to another episode of EdTech Teachers Spring Renewal Webinars. Tonight, our topic is going to be powerful learning experiences with augmented and virtual reality. I'm glad to see a good number of people are here. I hope you'll be dropping comments into the chat. If you have any questions, please do that. I would much rather swerve to what you need than just kind of keep heading down a road. So I'm interested in how many of you have had a chance to use ARVR. Right? How many of you have actually tried it? It's been kind of hyped for a long time, but I don't know that we've seen it come to fruition in a lot of schools. And I think that sometimes there are some misconceptions that get in the way of us using it effectively. So like I said, here at EdTech Teacher, we're trying to find ways to make this technology meaningful to your students in sustainable ways, right? So just a little bit about me. I'm Sean McCusker. Hello again. I am, first of all, the author of a book, Becoming Active Citizens, which just was nominated for a Forward Indies Book of the Year award in the education category. Excited about that. I spent 25 years as a classroom teacher and administrator. I taught social studies, but my background is truly in full inclusion. All of my teaching involved full inclusion, special education, highly differentiated for individual students. That's kind of my background. If you hear me talk with a social studies accent, I apologize. I spent a lot of time teaching alternative night school too. So a lot of what inspires me in the classroom has to do with energizing people who may not be comfortable in the normal environment of learning, right? A typical classroom, right? All right. So also a little bit about EdTech Teacher. At EdTech Teacher, our goal is to help educators thrive in modern learning environments. Our job is to help you to make the things that can be challenging, difficult, and a little bit to wrap your brain around, something that is accessible to you, right? I'm a big fan of ARVR because I think that we need a little bit of guidance to get started. I think in the same way, EdTech Teacher is focusing a lot on AI right now because there's a lot for us to divine about where to go and how to start. So that's part of our mission to help educators thrive. I also want to point out to you that we have a summer learning pass that is going to follow up after these spring renewal webinars are over. Our summer learning pass sessions are going to begin shortly in June. On this slide, I have it says 6 weeks for 12 workshops. We've actually gotten up to 15 workshops now. And the cool thing is, if you sign up for one class, you get all the classes. So for the one low fee of $195, you can get in, go to the class you want, but also see everything else, get all the resources. That's important. That's meaningful to me that we did that at EdTech Teacher, because when I was in school teaching, I had to do favors to people to get the ability to go to conferences and to jump into training. So we're hoping that we can give you a lot of learning for a reasonable price. All right. That said, I want to ask this question. What was a technology that was promising that ended up eating up time and resources and never really came to fruition, right? What was an initiative that you did or a technology that you have employed that just never panned out the way that you thought it was? And if you can drop it into the chat. All right, I'll give it a second. So I think we've all had an initiative where we get in and then we realize that the initial effort to bring it to reality was a lot of energy and hard to sustain. So we want to be able to do these things in a way that matters and is meaningful. The reason I say this is because ARVR is one of those technologies that you can put a lot in the front end, but if you don't have the pedagogy, it's going to kind of fall flat. So I think that it's important not to get caught up in the highest of high end. I've seen schools with huge labs, expensive labs, but they don't understand how to employ them in order to have the stories that the kids have be like expressed through that technology. So how can we, in a reasonable way, use ARVR technology to make sure that those tools that you buy are meaningful, purposeful, and they help you get towards the goals your school is striving for, but at the same time, they don't end up that device in the corner that people talked about like it was supposed to be such a big deal. And that's something that we can do with ARVR in the right way. So here's our challenge. Augmented and virtual reality tools are really cool. And if you experience them, you're going to love them. But how do you use them in support of meaningful learning and not just as a novelty? Like, what's the educational use beyond just being really cool? All right. And then the next thing is that there's many VR tools that are available that have gone away, right? They've been retired during the pandemic, they kind of disappeared. So how do we make sure that the tools that we choose to base our programs upon are the ones worth investing in that are going to last, right? Like, how can we look at that? And then finally, what does effective ARVR use in the classroom look like? What are some examples of what we can do in order to give students that experience? Okay. But another question I'd like to throw out there for the chat, for those of you who are looking, is this. If ARVR is the answer, what's the question? Right? Like, if this is a technology that's going to change things, then what is it an answer to? What's the need that it addresses? And I hope that in the next few slides, we're going to get to a way to show you how to do all of these things and answer that ARVR question. If you have a suggestion for if ARVR is the answer, what's the question? Drop that into the chat and we can share that across with everybody else who's watching. All right. So here's the solution that we find. Build powerful experiences and use ARVR for student creation, right? We can do things that are impossible otherwise, right? ARVR can provide experiences that you just can't have. ARVR is also a really powerful way to build empathy within students. There's a very big difference about reading a story about someone and proceeding through that story as if you were in that person's place. And so the ways that we teach diversity, the ways that we discuss understanding like the empathy for a character are very different when we can teach empathy in virtual reality. The next thing is next level storytelling. What if instead of telling a story where we write it on a page or just record ourselves in video, we can record a student walking down their street in any city in the world and share that across the globe, right? But also as a form of creative expression, virtual reality is an amazing place for students to express creative thoughts. You can use tools like CoSpaces. So let's get to that. Let's talk about some more examples as we talk about how to implement these solutions. I want to start with this. If you look at any of these tools are all gone. They all disappeared during the pandemic. They were all powerful tools, but because they couldn't be monetized, because during the pandemic, their use fell off, they ended up disappearing. Some of these are really hard for me to imagine. Google Expeditions was fantastic. Give me a +1 in the chat if you've ever used Google Expedition. Street View is another one. Google Street View was really great for making pictures. Tour Creator, Moatboat was a great one. It had AI where you could tell different characters to act in different ways, creating entire environments. But they're all gone now. So what's left and how can we choose tools that are going to last? But let's start with the science behind it. Why is AR/VR powerful, right? So let's think about this. Think about how you learned to ride a bike. When you were a kid, did anyone give you a lesson about how to ride a bike? Or was it something where you have to get on and you have to do it, right? And eventually we have to let go and let you do it. Think about how it felt when you were riding that bike. You were riding a bike and you had to balance yourself. Every time you press down with your left foot, your body has to be thrown right. And you have to learn the way that feels, right? And so much of it is situational. It's hard to explain until you've actually done it. Well, that's kind of one of the roles that AR/VR is going to fill by creating context and situations that we can't otherwise create. A better example of it might be this. Imagine that we had the world's greatest swimmer, the best swimmer ever. And we had that person who had won more gold medals than anyone else. And we had them create PowerPoint lessons for swimming for beginners, intermediate swimming 101, advanced swimming 201, right? After going through all of those classes on a PowerPoint, how many of you would let your child jump in the water to actually swim after mastering and getting perfect scores in a class taught by the best teacher ever, right? It's asinine, really, right? You're never going to learn how to swim unless you're in the water and feel yourself getting streamlined and understand how to breathe as you come out of the water. It's incredibly challenging, but you have to do it. Now, we can't replicate water, but the first virtual reality experience I ever did with a high-res headset on was watching a video in 360 surround with that headset on with noise-canceling headphones. And when I was done, I was out of breath because the context of being underwater made my body hold its breath in response because it knew it had been trained to do that underwater. So we can trigger our reactions and the context that we have by being in an immersive environment. All right. The scientific principle for those things that we're talking about is actually situated cognition. And there's some key concepts that go along with situated cognition. First of all, knowledge can't be separated from context or the situation where it's acquired. You can't talk to someone about swimming and do a good job without being in the water to experience the water, right? You can't train soldiers. When I was in the military, they would train us to be calm and think under pressure. We had to go through a military course while bullets were flying over our heads, because you're never going to be able to replicate that. And everyone's first reaction is absolute fear, right? So creating an environment in context where the skills can be employed. Right? Also, learning is connected to a culture, place, activity, and social situation. I can teach you about a fact, but knowledge is socially constructed, right? So in the situation that you're in the place where it's happening, things happen differently, right? Like you can't take the skills that you learn about speaking Chinese out of the context of being in China. It's not the same to be in an English-speaking country, because culture, activity, and the social situation dictate what goes on. And also we learn from in and from specific interactions. If we pull learning out of context, it loses all of its meaning, okay? Here's a quote from a great article on situated cognition by Brown, Allen, and Collins. Many methods of education have assumed a separation between knowing and doing, treating knowledge as if it's an integral self-sufficient substance independent from the situations in which it's learned. So how can we create the situations where knowledge is valid? So that's where we get into what we can really do with it. The Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab is one of the most fantastic places to look for information about virtual reality. And if you go to that website, there's article after article, study after study, and incredible resources. But their takeaway for what virtual reality's real power is that it can enhance people's empathy beyond what you can do just by reading and knowing and understanding. There's one famous video where you are walking through a street in a war-torn area, and you're seeing around you all of the triggers and the events and the experiences. It's incredibly powerful, and that can be really good. But anything powerful can also be bad if it triggers something in you, right? So we want to use virtual reality to trigger empathy and to understand the people around the world to improve relationships. That's the take from Stanford Virtual Reality Lab. This is a study. It's linked in this deck, and we can put the deck out there. I'll tweet that out after we're done. Basically, that the experience of embodying another person is fundamentally different than imagining yourself in that person's shoes, right? So they did racial embodiment. You can't be another race. Like there's no experience that's going to let you be another race. But what you can do is go in a virtual environment, walking through a community, being seen as a person of that race or that gender, or experiencing what's happening to get a better sense, nothing perfect, right? A better sense of what those people are going through in a situation at a given time. All right. So, oops, hold on 1 minute. So one example of that I like to do when I'm doing a live experience, I like to start off in my sessions by asking someone to try to ride a roller coaster on Oculus Quest while they're standing up. And I remind them that you're just standing in the middle of a room no matter what. I'll let them hold my elbow, let them steady themselves. Very few people can experience a virtual roller coaster and not need to sit down, because the movement is very real. Your body is reacting as if you're moving. You're having a very strong reaction. And when you go over a ledge, you feel it as if you're falling, even though you know rationally that you're standing in the middle of a room, right? So let's look at some uses, how ARVR is currently being used to teach people, how it's currently being used to train people in the experiences that they're going through, right? So briefly, let's talk about the difference between virtual and augmented reality. So virtual reality is something where you're provided by an artificial environment through which you experience things, like an artificial habitat, or an artificial room, an artificial space. It's all fake. It isn't necessarily real around you, but it may seem very real. AR, augmented reality, is when we overlay digital information on top of an image. We're seeing the real world, but we're overlaying information over the top of that. And there's a lot of good examples of that we can use every day. In fact, Google Maps has a great version of that overlay for you when you're traveling out in the streets of some city you don't know or in the airport. All right, so Google Maps Live is that example. You're probably used to this part of Google Maps, the part where you see the path that you're supposed to go to get to some place, but you may not know that if you go into Google Maps Live and you click on Start AR, it will show you the path in front of you, and it will give you directions overlaid over the path or the sidewalk that you're using. The same is true within airports, but in airports, they have a system where there's arrows on the floor that will take you from one gate to the other gate inside the airport. So an incredible ability to overlay data over where you're walking. Okay. One of the better examples of AR use is this. Anybody recognize who this is? Big kudos, bonus points to you if you can figure out who this person is and drop that into the chat. Right. So one of the places where AR is used a lot is in flight simulators for pilots. They get into a cockpit that's very real. They go through a process of flying a plane, and they can get scenarios that you couldn't otherwise deal with. This is actually Sully Sullenberger, and Sully Sullenberger is the one from the Miracle on the Miracle on the Hudson, where he landed a commercial plane into the river, saving everybody on board. And in doing that, he made the decision from when his plane was struck by birds to when he made the decision to put it into the river was less than 40 seconds. And when you listen to the audio of that, he's as calm as can be. Well, you're probably not, but he sounds calm. And everyone on the plane did everything that they were supposed to do. They followed all the procedures. They did all the checklists. And by the time that plane landed, it floated. Everyone lived. The only thing they forgot to do was shut one little vent that let water come onto the back of the plane. One little thing. But the reason for that is that he had been in more crash simulations than any other pilot with his airline. So it wasn't an accident. He'd literally done that before under the circumstances with the context around him, the chaos happening, making those decisions under the strained environment that he was in. And it resulted in a successful emergency landing in the river. It's common for pilots to be in that situation. Another great example of that is medical education. There's virtual reality experiences where students can go in and do operations, and they can be thrown curveballs. They can have a patient start to need a defibrillator or have a crisis within that surgery, and then they can react. And they can allow themselves to be overwhelmed by the emotion in a virtual setting so that when it happens in reality, it doesn't happen to them. They're using simulations like this at the high school that my kids went to, just down the road. But also, when you're using AR and VR, the best uses for them are places that follow the ride model, right? Examples of experiences that are rare. You couldn't possibly do it because it couldn't happen, right? For instance, you can't go see Notre Dame Cathedral anymore. It burned down. But there's an incredible virtual experience where you can walk through every part of that building virtually, even though the building is gone. Situations that are impossible, flying over a map or experiencing underwater for long periods of time. Places that are dangerous. You can take students to see things over a cliff or from high altitudes without having to experience the actual danger of it. Or expensive, right? One of my favorite experiences is a virtual journey to Mars. Students are never going to be able to ride on a bus across Mars in our current environment. It's too expensive, but we can give them that experience with actual pictures of Mars, and we can transform a bus into a spacecraft that's riding across the planet Mars. So really powerful experiences that we otherwise couldn't do. Here is some of what the research says about this. In a virtual reality CPR class, students were asked to do one course, either a regular course or the virtual reality course. Those who did the virtual reality course were 24% more likely to remember to call 911, 30% more likely to ask for an AED, and the survival rate of the patients that they served was significantly higher because they were taking those steps, all because they'd done a virtual reality rescue that they could increase the stress of, right? In this example, in a study by Stanford Virtual Reality Labs, they said that students who did perspective-taking activities in virtual reality were more likely to use the pronouns we, us, and our when talking about problems that they'd experienced, because to them, the experience was real and they were part of the group whose experience they had shared virtually. Okay. So now is the good part. For the last part of this, I want to show you what are some tools you could start looking at to simply get started? Where's a place to dive in? Right. So first of all, there's different levels. And so I've labeled these tools as like the kind of use that you're using. There's low fidelity consumption, there's high fidelity consumption, then there's low fidelity creation and high fidelity creation. I'm a big believer that we should move to creation and that we should let students use this as an expressive tool. But a high fidelity consumption experience is really good. So some of you may say, why would you even think about a low fidelity consumption experience? If an experience is overwhelming, we can tone down the experience by making what they're seeing less realistic and a little bit more cartoonish. And that low fidelity might create a buffer from the intensity of an experience as well. Okay, so we're gonna look at some ARVR to consume. Some of the best you can use if you have a headset right now is any one of these three experiences. Traveling While Black talks about the Green Book that allowed African Americans to travel across the country and know where the places that were accepting of their business and protective of their safety were. That experience will show you side by side modern places and the past, the version of them when they were segregated. And it's a very powerful way to experience the culture of segregation that existed. Notes on Blindness is an experience that allows you to experience what it's like to sense things without your vision. I highly recommend that one. And Anne Frank House is another great one that shows you a perfect version of what Anne Frank's house was like when she was in hiding. All those are crazy powerful, but something smaller is Merge Cube apps. Merge Cubes are a great place for you to start. If you don't have a Merge Cube, you can get a paper version of that online. It's very easy. These tools allow you to, looking through a device, project some kind of a graphic onto the cube that you can manipulate. You can hold a beating heart, the solar system. You can zoom in on it. You can have students create different assets using design software and then project that onto the Merge Cube so that they can see it in virtual reality before they print it, saving money and speeding the process, right? So as a tool for iteration, there are many, many Merge Cubes apps. That's a great place for you to start if you're just getting started in virtual reality. So like I said, the Merge Cube viewer and object viewer allows people to upload things. Here's an example of that paper Merge Cube that you can find online. World Wildlife Foundation Rivers and Forests is a way for you to have students sit back and look at an ecosystem and what happens when you add rain. It allows students to add rain, build dams, remove the dams, and see how water flows. And as you use this tool, it allows the students to spin around and zoom in on it and project it onto a desk. So looking through their device, you can see a variety of different experiences and what happens when you change the environment, how it affects erosion, right? It's a very simple tool, not expensive. It's a limited tool in that there's one experience you can go through and then that's it. But for students, it could be really helpful to teach them the concept. Nearpod virtual reality is another great place to get in very simply and easily into using virtual reality. There are many, many explorations that they use. You can go to specific places. There's a whole section on colleges to make people a little bit more comfortable seeing the campuses of these colleges, help people to tour schools that they might go to. There's also a variety of historical buildings. There are a variety of museums that you can go and see. And all of those come along with the regular Nearpod subscription. It's a great place for you to find some high fidelity consumption. A unique version of high fidelity consumption is this app. It's WDAR 1933 through 1945. It's a Holocaust survivors testimonial app. And all of the survivors have been recorded and they can be projected into your room. And it's meant so that the person that you see sitting in this screen can be sitting amongst your class. So when I use this, I put the students arrayed in front of the classroom. I projected the device onto the projector, and they could watch this person giving testimony about their experience in the Holocaust while they sat amongst those survivors. It can be a highly powerful experience. Some low fidelity creation. The AR Maker app is a simple way to start layering and creating. You can take any images and take those images and place them in a scene and then lock them in and allow people to walk around them to create 3D art. So with some simple line drawings, this person created a 3-dimensional Snoopy story that they were able to project and then walk around and through. They made an animated comic strip. Adobe Arrow is a really cool, powerful tool. It's more complex than some of the other ones, but it's awesome in the sense that there are so many assets and building it is pretty simple if you're in the Adobe platform. It's both an app, but it's also a desktop tool. So you can build in multiple places. And when you've built it on your desktop, you can use your device to go through that virtual environment. Highly recommend that one as a tool because it has so many options in it. But my best experience, the tool that I would really highly recommend you dive into is CoSpaces, because CoSpaces builds not just virtual environments where your students can use it to build a setting exercise, to build, I've seen classes use scenes from books that they recreate, and then they can use headsets to walk through the scene that is created from To Kill a Mockingbird as Atticus Finch goes out to confront the dog. Right? To create an understanding of the language in a book, you take that language and turn it into an actual physical place that you can walk through. There are many, many assets, but it also involves the ability to code. So if you go to this next slide, it has a code blocks, which allows students to program the actions of the participants or the characters in the story. And in that way, then they can go into their headsets, interact while there are characters walking through an experience as it was in the book. You can fill in the role of Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird, or be one of the characters in a student's favorite book by building the experience. It's very flexible. It can teach STEM and coding at the same time. These are experiences that were created by a teacher who used CoSpaces and then had his 3rd grade students draw an environment, and then took that environment and layered it on the bottom of a CoSpaces space, and then animated it with animals. And then using their headsets, they got to walk through the environment that they created in CoSpaces that began with paper and crayons, and then eventually turned in the interactions of the animals that lived in that environment. Really powerful. This is an overview of it, but you can use in this other video an example actually physically walking through the space where the animals are. So you can walk up to the tigers as they're hunting. And this is kind of scary because even though it looks silly in video, when you're in it and the tigers pounce, it's a little overwhelming. Okay. Another cool place for your students to explore is in My World 360. My World 360 is a digital promise product. They will sometimes have money to send cameras out to students, but they encourage students to record experiences of their town, their community, and their life to upload and share with people across the world. And in that way, you can go experience life in Nigeria, in South Africa, in South America, in you name it, there are versions of that around the world. So if you're looking for an experience where you can create something, but also consume what others have created, My World 360 is a fantastic storytelling platform and a great experience for students. You can get a camera that's expensive for it, but there are other options for that. A Theta camera takes 360 images and records. That is something that could work. You don't need a lot. You can use one in a classroom and create a lot of different projects. If you're used to creating experiences in Tour Creator, the newest tool that will allow you to do that is 360 Schools. It used to be 360 Cities, you might recall, but now they've created a creation platform that will replace what Tour Creator was years ago. You can upload your images, use images that they have to create your own personal tours and add audio and links to that experience. So it's a great creation tool. So we're coming to the end of our time here. I just want to say that if you want to do a good job of using this, don't focus on expensive technology. Focus on meaningful experiences and tools for creation. Consider how you can use ARVR to build empathy for experiences across your curriculum, right? If you want to follow up on this, this is a fast experience. It's hard not to be hands-on. In our summer experience, it'll be a lot more building. So sign up to attend our summer course, Powerful Learning Experiences with Augmented and Virtual Reality. That course will run over 3 days, or you can hire us and we can come to your schools. We do a lot of work with schools to build experiences and help them get creating in sustainable ways. Don't forget to look out for those summer workshops, our summer pass. Like I said, if you sign up for one course, you sign up for my virtual reality course, you get all the other ones as well. Right? And again, if you want to find out more, you can always go to edtechteacher.org. I would be happy to work with you, talk to you, answer questions. You can reach out to me at McCusker at EdTech Teacher. Thank you, everyone, for coming, showing up, and being with us tonight. I appreciate it. I hope you have a good evening and hang in there. The end of the school year is coming. Summer is just around the corner. Thanks on behalf of everyone at EdTech Teacher. I hope to see you at our next webinar. Bye-bye. Have a good night.